Um, good evening, everyone. It being the appointed hour, we will begin. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the process, we will for each item, the officers will give a brief presentation about the application and explaining their recommendations. We will then have a presentation from an objector and an applicant. So we will put the applicant will speak first, and then we'll hear from the objector. For each item, the applicant will have 5 minutes, and the objector will have 5 minutes. If there's 2 or more for any one application, that time will be split between will be split into 2. So I hope that clears everything up. So the membership is as listed, but with obviously Councillor Cetus is on approved leave of absence, and I will continue to act in the mayoral capacity. We have apologies for, tonight from Councillor Tim Lyons and also from Councillor Angela Valloa. And next is disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No, okay. Then the confirmation of the previous planning committee minutes. Moved Councillor McCarthy and seconded from Councillor Lee. Do you have any comments, Councillor McCarthy?
No.
Councillor Lee?
No.
Okay, then I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Next we have consideration of reports. Report 5.1, 16 Aberdeen Grove in Northcote.
Thank you, Councillors. This is an application to demolish the existing dwelling on the land and construct 2 double-storey, side-by-side attached dwellings. Each dwelling will contain 3 bedrooms and be provided with 2 undercover car parking spaces. All vehicular access will be via the constructed right-of-way, which is a bluestone right-of-way. The dwellings adopt a traditional living arrangement with a ground floor private open space located to the rear of the site, directly adjoining the respective living areas. The application was advertised in the normal fashion, the sign was displayed from the site, and notices were sent to adjoining owners multipliers, and as a result of that process, 5 objections have been received from the immediate community. The grounds of objection from the community, and these are summarised and listed on page 8, and I'll quickly refer to those. Impact on heritage character of the area, overshadowing, daylight to existing habitable room, those impacted, overlooking, on-boundary construction, double-storey construction, inappropriate street setback, precedent, set for future development, loss of existing vegetation, noise and car parking. Councillors, our assessment of this application is that the project is supportable. The applicant has, on several occasions, spoken to Council's Heritage Advisor, and as a result of those discussions, variations have been in the design, and further to that, we've included additional conditions requiring even further changes. Councillors, I might turn specifically to our recommendation, which is to support the project with conditions. Conditions 1A through to 1J specifically refer to changes proposed to the project. For example, 1A refers to brick bases of the front veranda column reduced to 100mm above the windowsill height. There are other changes required to overall heights of walls on boundary. The headroom clearance to the carports to be reduced in height to reduce the impact of overshadowing onto neighbouring properties. Overall, council believes the application is supportable, and we recommend that a notice of decision be issued with conditions noted on page 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the agenda.
I have one person listed to speak here, and that is Martin Thompson, on behalf of Peyton Waite, who are the applicant. Mr. Thompson.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Martin Thompson. I'm a town planning consultant with Peyton Waite. We prepared the town planning submission for this application. I'm sure you've read the officer's report, and we'd just like to take this opportunity to make some following comments in light of the objections. The application was subject to a pre-application meeting as guided with design. The proposal has the support of Council's Heritage Advisor, which is important. The design achieves a high level of compliance with RES code, and minor modifications suggested are acceptable to us. Proposal enables on-site parking for 4 cars accessed from the rear to remove any impact to the streetscape and on-street parking. In terms of landscaping in front of the property, we will utilise a similar front setback to the adjacent properties. And this will provide an area for planting due substantially to the fact that there are no driveways. Private open space at the rear accords with RES code requirements, even though there's also parking within. In terms of character, the development will read as one double-storey dwelling in the streetscape that achieves a front setback that is in keeping with its location and adjacent development without the added encouragement of additional driveway crossings that you often get from new density. I would like to refer you to the neighbourhood character summary at page 13 of the officer's report, where I think it succinctly says the following. The dwelling to be acknowledged is not contributory as a heritage building. The buildings cited to create open space areas that are commensurate with neighbouring sites. Parking will not dominate the frontage or impact the street. Height and form of the dwellings is compatible with the heritage character of the area. The architectural detail and materials that promote the character of the precinct, again, with Council's Heritage Advisor's support. Materials and finishes reflect those found in the precinct. That's pretty much all we need to say. Councillors, we consider that this is an opportunity for a diversity of housing in this location that can accommodate a moderate amount of housing growth. That's all I have to say.
Okay, for this application, we don't have any objectors listed to speak, so I'm going to throw it over to...
I want to bring in, I missed out getting through, but I have a moment to speak about it.
I'm happy to give you, we don't normally, but I am happy to give indulgence on this occasion.
Thank you.
So if you want to come forward, and if you could state your name and the address, please.
I'm Damien Crowe. I'm from 10 Aberdeen Road in Northcote. I'm one of the clients. My biggest thing about it is the setbacks on this building. I see in the report they're allowing a setback to the neighbours of 3.6 metres because they're stating the neighbour of 20 has a veranda that goes out to 3.6 metres, and they're putting a substantial veranda section in form of the house, which in Darebin's council, to me, is written as halfway between the two adjoining properties. and this one is purely well in front, or slightly in front of the furthest one out. And the development of the second story, every other house, and Meersville 1 is one that's developed in that street, we've had to keep it behind the front room of the property, where this one purely shows the second story is halfway in front of the front room of the second story building. So, two setbacks, from what I can see in the line of heritage, doesn't fit in with the street and the heritage overlay area. So that's good.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Crowe. Could I'll now call for questions from councillors. Do we have any questions? Are there any? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Through you to the officers, if we could just get an explanation as to the site coverage and what, I suppose, in terms of the consideration of site coverage in this instance, we've got 66%, which is proposed, and I just want to understand the conditioning to try to bring that into compliance. If I can get a bit more information other than what's included in the report.
Thanks, Councillor McCarthy. Mr. Rollis.
Councillors, the site coverage does exceed the Reese Code provision. However, the officer has made quite clear in the report that it still complies with the objective. I'll reiterate the point, I suppose. The additional site coverage is generally minor and the not contains an adequate presentation of the street. Reductions to the built form to achieve compliance would compromise internal amenity with no discernible benefit to the public realm or neighbouring properties. The area comprises many fine-grained lots with development exhibits high site coverage. I think that is important, that is one element to consider. And it's important for officers to also take into account maintaining appropriate internal amenity as well as an appropriate streetscape element, particularly in the heritage streetscape. And it's our opinion that exceeding the site coverage in this instance is justifiable.
Councillor McCarthy.
Just a separate question, if I may. It's just if I can get a response from the officers to the concerns raised by Mr. Crowe, the objector, I think it's Crowe, the objector, regarding the consideration of the street setback. Sure. And the way in which council has made an assessment and understanding the particularities of how this is calculated in relation to neighbouring properties. I'd just like to get a response to the objector's comments.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Mr. Rolls.
Certainly, councillors. In the assessment of front setback, particular attention has been placed on the setback of the wall associated with number 14, Adelaide Grove. As mentioned earlier, the extensive veranda associated with number 20, Aberdeen Grove. We've imposed a condition requiring a further setback of an additional 100 mil, so it does comply with the setback of the dwelling at number 14. So 3.5 proposed. We've included a condition requiring a 3.6 setback. There is opportunity, or the design could have been amended to stagger the setbacks, but from a heritage point of view, that would have a greater impact on the streetscape. And further to that, it would push building bulk further into that sensitive area, backyard realm of these properties. So our heritage assessment is that a 3.6 metre setback for the ground floor section, which matches the number 14, the dwelling at number 14 Aberdeen Grove, is an acceptable setback. It provides opportunity for painting within the front setback. It coincides with the setback at number 14 Aberdeen Grove. And importantly, as I mentioned, it also maintains a building that provides an appropriate heritage appearance in Aberdeen Grove, whilst also protecting the backyard realm of the neighbouring buildings. So taking all those matters into account, the 3.6 metre setback of the ground floor is acceptable. I have noted double-storey component is also set back, and that generally lines up with the ground floor wall associated with number 20 Aberdeen Road. And again, our heritage advisor believes that's sufficient relief not to impact on the streetscape of Aberdeen Road.
It's just a supplementary in relation to that, if I can.
Okay, I will give you a supplementary, but after that I'm going to go to other councils.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Let's just look. It's just I just wanted to pick up whether, in the consideration of this application and looking at the options that were available, whether consideration was given during the consultation process with officers around actually reducing the depth of the buildings by actually scaling back the buildings so that it didn't encroach so much into the depth of the property, because I picked up that comment from Mr. Rollis. Pushing the building back from the front would push it further back into the backyard, but what about if the actual buildings were more appropriately scaled in relation to the size of the property? Was that ever considered as part of the consultation process with the applicant?
Mr. Rollis.
I think, councillors, the way the officers would view this project is, we provide sufficient setback from the street to maintain the heritage streetscape, and we believe there's a tick there. With regard to the setback to the rear, there is sufficient open space for the enjoyment of future residents, but also providing sufficient setback from that backyard growing. Hypothetically, yes, the dwelling footprints could be reduced, but we believe that would impact on the internal amenity for future occupants. And when we assess an application, the future occupants' enjoyment of space is also as important as enjoyment of space associated with existing dwellings nearby. They are all residents, or will be residents of Darebin, and it's a balance. I'm not sure whether I've precisely answered your question, but we believe a balance has been reached where the heritage streetscape is protected, neighbouring amenities protected, and we also create an appropriate internal living environment for future residents.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McCarthy. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Greco.
Through you, Mr Acting Chair, I've just got two very quick questions.
Yep.
One is in relation to the overshadowing. I note that in the report, and you addressed this in your earlier comments, about the reducing the height of the carport to 2.1. I just want to get a clear understanding that by reducing the carport to 2.1, that will fully satisfy the standard in regards to overshadowing.
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, that's good.
Do you have a further?
And I have a second question, as I mentioned
yes.
at the outset.
Yep.
And the second question is to pick up on the issue of site coverage. I notice on page 14 of the report it talks about that that the area exhibits high site coverage in relation to the other dwelling. Do we know what that is? Is it over 60%, or is it?
Sorry, other dwellings?
Yeah, in relation to page 14, in the report it says that the area comprises many fine-grained lots with developments that exhibit high site coverage, and that's one of the justifications that's used to say even though that this exceeds 60%. I just want to get an understanding of what that is.
Councillor, I don't have the precise site coverage for neighbouring buildings, but a quick view of the aerial photography to me clearly demonstrates there is high site coverage on narrow sized blocks throughout this region, and it wouldn't be uncommon to have site coverage that exceeds that 60% mark, purely because the lots are narrow, also have smaller side area, and as a result, the dwellings do occupy a large portion of the site, resulting in that high site coverage.
Okay, no further questions.
Okay, and do we have any further questions from anyone?
I'm happy to move the recommendations. No further questions, Mr Chair.
Okay, so I do have a mover in Councillor Fontana. Can I have a seconder? Okay, do we have any debate on it?
No.
Would you like to speak to the
Oh,
motion?
just briefly, Mr Chair, a couple of comments which the officer made. This application did attract 5 objections. Normally a dual lock such as this would go to delegation. But I'm actually glad that there were some comments made in relation to a heritage advisor and the dialogue they've had with the applicant, and subsequently they've come to an agreement to ensure that the street appearance is maintained to give that heritage feel. That's very, very important. And also in relation to site coverage now, the map where it says the site and design response plan, there's several dwellings there, several overhead sites where probably one in excess of 60%, probably 28, 26, and probably number 8. So I think in relation to site coverage, this one is comparable to those already mentioned there. I'm also glad there's no on-street car losses where access to the property is at the rear, and the condition there requires a right-of-way to be constructed. And also it's not built to boundary like we do see with some dual locks. There are setbacks from the bottom level and the upper level, both from the front street setback and also the sides as well. And also the map on page, comments on page 13 also do state that the normal streetscape elevation, the roof lines are compatible to those in the rest of the street too, Mr Chair.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Yes, there were 2 issues that concern me about this application. One is setback, one is site coverage. The setback has already been explained by the officers. I can see the rationale in terms of lining up against number 14 and reducing the setback, the ground level setback, and having the second story setback to be in line number 20. So, and that would present a uniform appearance as per our heritage advisor's advice. In terms of site coverage, I do notice that yes, there are quite a number of properties, number 28, number 26 and number 10 on Aberdeen Grove all appear to have significantly higher rate of site coverage. So therefore, while there is a small increase in site coverage, that is in context of the neighbourhood, so I'm quite happy to support that.
Okay, are there any further speakers?
I'll speak against it, Mr Acting Chair. While I appreciate the comments of other councillors in relation to the justification for the variations to Res Code, I do note that there are 3 what I consider significant variations from Res Code. I think the officers have done a good job attempting to try to condition this into compliance, but I don't feel that we're quite there, and I'm not satisfied with the outcome that will result. And that's ultimately, I think, why this has probably attracted more objections than the average dual lock would attract. We fail in compliance with the street setback, and while I appreciate the justification, it would have been good to see something that was compliant coming to us. The site coverage issue, I think, is an important one. We're looking at 67% here, based on the applicant's designs, and while there is a high level of density, and I know Aberdeen Grove very well, and there is a lot of density there in terms of building bulk on particular sites. We don't necessarily improve a situation by repeating errors of the past, so I'm highly conscious of that. The one that stands out for me, though, and this is the major cause of objection that I have to this, is the length of wall on boundary, and we're looking at a variation from the 15.5 metres, which the Res Code recommends or suggests, to actually having wall on boundary at 21.4 metres. That is quite significant, and while there is a justification here about the fact that the adjoining properties are impacted on a minimal level because it's a walkway rather than open space, the rule is in the Res Code for a reason, and I just find that that's just an excessive variation from Res Code in relation to wall on boundary. So on that basis, I can't support it.
Okay, do I have any other speakers for or against? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, and that's carried. So the planning committee has decided to grant the permit. This decision can be appealed to VCAT. Objectors have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal at VCAT. The applicant would have 60, but notice's decision will be lodged and sent to all objectors and the applicant within the next week. We now move on to 5.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application relates to 672 Plenty Road and seeks approval to develop what is technically a 5-storey building, which presents as a 4-storey building to Plenty Road. The development proposes a total of 6 dwellings. 3 of those are 2 bedrooms and the remaining 3 are single bedroom units. There's a 55 square metre shop proposed in addition to 3 car parks which are proposed at the rear through a car stack-up arrangement. The subject land is quite small. It's a terrace style parcel of 203 square metres with a frontage of 6.4 metres to Plenty Road. There's an important section, councillors, in Mr. Chairman, in page 32 to page 35, which takes you through a recent VCAT decision and tribunal decision regarding Amendment C137, and some careful commentary in the report to guide the committee through how that's to be considered, and taking in some of the recent remarks made by the tribunal in relation to a VCAT hearing at 629A Plenty Road, which is almost frozen across the board. The implications of that finding from VCAT are fairly significant in the recommendation before you, and that's explained in those sections. The application's been advertised. There have been 17 objections received. The grounds of objections in response to the concerns are raised on pages 27 and 28, and I'm sure they've been read. There's also, just back to the commentary from Amendment C137, one of the important things and the key message out of that is that we're obliged to, and officers are obliged to assess the planning application based on the planning scheme and the merits of the proposal as it exists against the current planning scheme. The report before you does highlight there are some areas of non-compliance if it's assessed against Amendment C137, and we hope those sections in the report are clear in explaining the constraints around precise assessment. Arguably, the development complies with the mandatory heights, although this is a location where the panel has said, Council, I think you've got it too high in your exhibited version. It shouldn't be 6, it should be 4. Now, with the mandatory height, the height proposed here is the question. It's really going to look at the, and why I say technically it's a 5-storey building. The middle 2/3 of the building sit as 5 stories, but functionally it's 4. And it steps to 2 stories to the rear. And based on that assessment, through the report and taking into consideration the commentary from VCAT, it leads officers to the recommendation to support the proposal. Certainly are tools for the application, they are highlighted, and there are conditions proposed to address those addressable concerns. But it is noted that in assessing against the planning scheme, the VCAT comment on this regularly, even though it doesn't rely on the streets tab at the moment, it's acceptable against the merits of the planning scheme. That's why we have the recommendation for
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rudd. Could I don't have anyone from the on behalf of the applicant, but I do have an objector.
Sorry, with your permission, Councillor Walsh, my name's Chris McKenzie. You may be familiar with
Yep.
Also, the architect should be perused here. We should be listed for me to make a presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Mackenzie, I don't have you listed. I am happy to give you some indulgence. So.
Can I just check this is on? Yes, it is.
Yep.
Thanks. In the agenda material you've been provided, in addition to the report that Mr. Rudd has referred you to, there's a series of attached plans. It may be somewhat useful if you're able to take yourself to sheet A12, which is also referred to in the council stamps as advertised number 13 of 18. It shows a section plan which has the profile of the development viewed from the side. So on the left-hand side you have Plenty Road, which sits higher than the laneway. It gives you a very clear sense of the way in which the development has been shaped to have that 4 stories to Plenty Road that Mr. Rudd referred you to. And as he said, the 2-story profile on the laneway that then steps back. And when you see the top 2 floors, you can see how substantially that steps back off the rear lane so as to focus the development as a 4-story development to Plenty Road, but have that genuine recession and smaller presence to the rear lane. So if I just have you understanding that's the structure of this development. Well, you do have 5 levels where the car park level is a basement effectively on Plenty Road that comes in from the laneway level. But it's viewed from either the front or the back. There's a very different sense of how the development presents to each side of the public realm. Now this site's Commercial 1, which is the highest zoning, which is supported for the most intensive form of development throughout the whole of the city. It had reference to C138, which is one of your approved amendments, which has this site in a substantial area. You've also had reference to C137, which is still being worked through the system. Now, it's been at least 4 or 5 years the council have been working on the idea that Tyler Street, as part of the Plenty Road corridor, would be a focal point as an activity centre that already exists, that you wanted to revitalise and have as a point to encourage redevelopment. The fact that it's an existing activity centre, the fact that it has the tram line are 2 of the key reasons why that support has been a fairly consistent view of council over the whole generation of the Plenty Road corridor study. So if this site is supported for genuine redevelopment as part of the Tyler Street precinct as a focal point within that broader Plenty Road, which is all supported for real change. So this is not, even though we are an early proposal in this particular area, it's not something that's coming out of the blue. It's something that you've been well supported for quite a number of years. It's almost towards the end, but as Mr. Rudd's report said, it's still not certain exactly what the final version will be in terms of the height or in terms of setback profiles. And that's why VCAB has said, because of that uncertainty, the better way to go is to actually look at the site, look at the context, and look at how it actually responds. And that's something that we've worked very actively with Mr. Rudd in particular, but also your other officers below him, to try and get guidance. We've been very aware that the principle of support has been there, but the detail of it has been a bit hard to work out because it's changed. And we've taken guidance from Mr. Rudd in coming up with the profile that we have, where we're very genuinely stepping off that rear to provide a softer, more recessed presentation to the laneway environment. The second thing to really understand, and this comes out from the aerial photo that you've been provided with, most of council's policy work assumes that this type of development will back onto another backyard across the laneway. We actually have a triangle-shaped site across our rear laneway that has recently been improved and redeveloped with 3 dwellings on it. The existing dwelling has been added to with 2 new 2-story reverse dwellings in that laneway environment. So we are less sensitive than a lot of the assumes you might be, where sometimes you'll just back straight onto someone's backyard. So that's another
30
reason why
seconds,
our
Ms.
profile,
McKenzie.
thank you, our profile should be seen as a suitable response, and the work we've done with council's officers should be supported. Ultimately, what we have is a proposal that is consistent with council's vision. It's consistent with what the plan scheme says now. As Mr. Rudd said, it exceeds res code quite comfortably, and it also reflects what the panel said was the right balance. We commend to you the officers' work with us and the work we've done to meet their expectations.
If you could wrap up now.
And we believe the recommendation of the officers should be supported. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. McKenzie. I now have one objector, Mr. George Zizis, from Tyler Street in Preston. Mr. Zizis, are you with us? Okay, Mr. Zizis must not be with us. So is anyone on behalf of the objector here? Okay, if not, I'm going to throw over to questions from councillors. Questions, are there any? Councillor Williams.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, Acting Mayor, I'd like to get clarification regarding the front unit that's been built on 200 Tyler Street. Now, their access to their property, would that be from Tyler Street or from the laneway? And the subsidiary question would, where would their clothesline be situated, considering if there's overshadowing from 2 o'clock onwards? So I'm a little concerned about 2 things. 1, access to that front unit, and 2, regarding overshadowing.
Mr. Rudd.
Mr. Chairman, the unit referred to is at 200 Tyler Street. As Mr. McKenzie said, it is a reverse living, so it has a balcony at first floor. Its access is from the laneway adjacent, which is shared with the properties fronting Plenty Road. In terms of overshadowing, the standard requires 5 hours of sunlight at the solstice on the 22nd of September. The application achieves a level of sunlight and daylight access to the living areas and the balcony up to 2 p.m, which complies with the standard.
Okay, council, any other question from councillors? Okay, Councillor Lee.
Yes, just want to seek through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, some understanding about parking restrictions along Plenty Road and Tyler Street. Given the proposed development has some 6 car parks short of the requirement, what are the parking restrictions around there that can sufficiently accommodate?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rudd.
Chairman, there is a recent addition to the with the good advice from the Acting Chief Executive Officer. Though you now find some detail in the officer's reports on parking restrictions that apply. In the context section of our reports, there's a brief mention of what's happening with the parking restrictions. Let's just get the page before we...
Just for the benefit of the gallery.
Sure.
It's on page 27.
Page 27. And there's an assessment further into the report, Mr. Chairman, on pages 39 and 40, where the officers detail the reasons for supporting the parking application. It is tight, but the circumstances in page 39 and 40, I think, are well explained on why there will be consideration. And added to that is the inclusion of some additional bike parking as well. So it does run on the premise that with the single bedroom dwellings, just for the benefit of the gallery, that there is a lower level of car ownership and requirement, and there are some areas where we want to encourage development that enables a green transport option as a primary purpose of travel.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rudd. Are there any further questions?
Happy to move an alternative motion.
You've got an alternative motion. Councillor Williams, can you please read your alternate motion?
The proposed height is excessive of the contents of the site and will present an overwhelming, so it's refusal, apologies.
Yep.
Due to the opposed height is excessive to the contents of the site and will present an overwhelming to the Plenty Road streetscape. The sitting at the rear of the building will unreasonably impact the amenity of the adjoining residential properties through the presentation of excessive height, visual bulk, loss of privacy and overshadowing. The internal light courts provide inadequate internal amenity to habitable rooms and does not adequately future-proof the development against future sustainable change of the Plenty Road corridor. The proposed parking reduction in the particular long-term demand spaces of dwelling and shop staff is not acceptable and impact on the traffic safety. The adverse impact on the neighbourhood character.
Okay, can I have a second? Okay, Councillor Lee. Councillor Williams, can you speak to it?
Well, considering that particular strip the topology is quite is quite different to any other part of Plenty Road. It also has a huge impact on neighbouring areas, particularly the neighbours next door and behind. The lack of car park spaces will definitely impact. There are definitely restrictions regarding time and what times and places that you can park on Plenty Road and Tyler Street. VCAT had never done a ruling for a 5-storey anywhere along Plenty Road in that particular strip on 200 metres from either side of Tyler Street, and I just don't feel comfortable that this is appropriate for the area.
Okay, okay, thanks, Councillor Williams. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you. I welcome the points raised by Councillor Williams. I am worried about the parking when we seek to have not reduction of 1 or 3, but up to 6 parking reductions. I think it's a major concern, particularly in light of the objections raised by our traffic management area on page 21 of the report. So I do find that an issue. It is an issue not only for the residents but also for the proposed shop, because without the actual sufficient car parking, I think we're setting up the shop to fail, and I think that's not an outcome that we seek to achieve in this particular application. The internal amenities are questionable in my opinion, particularly in light of the reverse living arrangements and the high density and the relatively low floor space of each apartment. So when you do add all these issues into consideration, this development falls quite short of what we want to achieve. Even though we have a desire for higher densification, that must not be traded off in terms of parking amenities and internal amenities for the shops and the residents in there. So while we have the intent, this does not meet the intent of our proposed densification on the major transport corridors. I'll leave it there, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Lee. Do I have any further speakers? Councillor Fontana.
I'd like to speak against the alternative recommendation on a couple of matters. First of all, I think we've received a very detailed set of plans here, which actually go into a lot of explanation as to why the officers came up with the recommendation to support the proposal. And at the summary on page 22, it does say that this section of Plenty Road is a defined strategic corridor where it's earmarked for intensification. We need to actually consider that when these applications come to us. Now, the map map A12 actually explains, identifies, the function of a 4-storey building. So it's not 5. C137 actually says that we're obliged to assess proposal in its current form with our scheme and actually complies with our current scheme. And also C138 also says that we are expecting substantial housing change along this strip of land. Our housing strategy also identifies this particular strip as one that is going to experience substantial change. So applications like this actually need to be given some merit, some consideration as well. Now, map A12, it's a very good map, as it was explained by the applicant's representative, that the gradient from Plenty Road to the laneway actually does indicate it's a functioning 4-storey building, not 5. We need to consider that. VCAT will probably go with what planning scheme consideration we have with 4-storey on Plenty Road, and it's a functioning 4-storey building. With the laneway at the rear, it does appear high, but the substantial setbacks from the rear of the laneway to the top of the building, they're set back substantially with quite substantial distances as well. It's despite the fact that there was a shortfall of some car park in the application, the officers tend to support the fact that this building here can actually function and comply as well. Reading through the build form, objectives, the design materials, they're also they've gone into a fair amount of detail to say that this is applicable and will be considered in the area in a not too distant future. This one, the first we've actually considered here at this side of Plenty Road. We've had some on the other side where this is slightly elevated. So, in consideration of officer recommendation, I think we should support it and
30 seconds.
and not take the alternative for refusal.
Do I get a right to reply?
I will if there are no are there any further speakers? Either for or against? No further speakers? Okay, then. In that case, Councillor Williams, you are to reply.
Now, there's an issue particularly regarding laneways. With the Vic roads, they have what's called a ruling of how many cars can actually use a laneway, particularly when it's a one-way laneway. We have a number of already units. If you look at the corner there, I think there's something like 30-something units already using that laneway. Then you've got the housing along there. If you allow this particular one to be overdeveloped, and then you allow 670 and 668 also develop, it stops then any other houses along there to develop at all to be using the laneway. And it's important that we look at the safety issue regarding when using a laneway, particularly if one comes in one direction and another one comes in another
Councillor
direction.
Williams, I just need to remind you that this is a right of reply and try not to bring in new information.
Oh, okay.
Okay then. Do you have anything further to add, Councillor Williams? You have still got time, so.
Well, just as I've already mentioned before, that VCAT has not allowed anything of this type of scale to be acceptable in this area, and obviously if you can, as my fellow councillor, Councillor Bowley, has already mentioned, that there's quite a number of issues of shops trying to contain or keep open in the area due to car parking. They can't seem to get customer car parking in the area because there seems to be a major overdevelopment happening already, and there's not enough car spaces for staff and customers to come and actually shop in the area. It's not a major activity centre. A major activity centre is considered as Northland Shopping Centre. It is a very small, local, old, run-down strip of shops.
That's why we need to revise it.
We need to revitalise it if we had the amount of proper car parking.
Point of order, Councillor Fontana and Councillor Williams, for debate. Time is not has elapsed. So I'm now going to put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Williams's alternative recommendation? All those against? Okay, and so the alternative...
Call for a division, please, Mr.
Okay, so a division. So all those in favour
Alternative motion.
of the alternate motion?
Alternate motion.
Yes. I name Councillor Williams, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Lee and Councillor Greco. And all those in favour? I name Councillor Fontana and myself. So council has resolved to refuse this application, and the applicant has 60 days to appeal this at VCAT, but I'm sure Mr. Mackenzie is familiar with the process now. could I now go to 5.3?
Thank you, councillors. Councillors, this is an application relating to a unit involving 4 dwellings, but it is relevant to provide a bit of background. Council previously refused an application for 4 dwellings on this site. The applicant has then exercised their right to appeal that decision of refusal to VCAT. Now, a hearing has been scheduled for the 7th of August 2015. On the 10th of June 2015, Council received amended plans. Now, these amended plans are the subject of the report before you. It is common practice now for applicants to have the ability to provide revised plans prior to a hearing, provided they provide ample time to all parties. And this is what has occurred here. I might quickly refer to the changes that result from these amended plans, and they include the following. Front setbacks to Howard Street increased from 7.9 metres for the garage and 7.5 metres for the dwelling to 8.57 metres for the garage, and between 8 metres and 7.5 metres for the dwelling. An increase in open space, particularly for dwelling 2 and 3, that is increased to 40 square metres. Previously, the open space provision was 32 square metres. Private open space of dwelling 4 increased to 39 square metres. Previously, it was 35 square metres. Ground level setbacks of dwelling 2, 3 and 4 from the eastern boundary increased to 4.1 metres. From 3.3 metres for dwelling 2 and 3, an increase to 3.8 metres from 3.3 metres for dwelling 4. First floor of dwelling 1 reduced in size with the deletion of the study and redesign of the bathroom. First floor of dwelling 2 and 3 redesigned to create upper level separation between dwellings 3 and 4 and separation between dwellings 1 and 2. An introduction to varied roof forms and an introduction to additional or new materials, external materials that is. Councillors, Council needs to form a view on the amended plans, so the matter can then be considered at VCAT. Our view is, as officers, that the amended plans create improvements to the design, particularly as they relate to increased setbacks from the eastern property boundary, increased front setback to Howard Street, separation between the dwellings, as I've noted, and we recommend support of the project subject to the conditions that have been noted. We cannot make a decision given Council has already made a decision to refuse the application, but as it relates to these amended plans, Council now needs to form a view. Thank you, Councillors.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Wallace. I have one, in this instance, I have one applicant wishing to speak and one objector. I call the applicant Mr. Brent Higginbottom. Thanks, Mr. Higginbottom.
My name's Brent here, Beyond Design Group. The application was supported by Council Town Planning Department. We have lodged, as you know, we've lodged an appeal against the Council's decision to refuse this application. Since lodging the appeal, we have amended the design to respond to some of the grounds of the refusal. The key changes and the benefits of these changes include the front setback to Howard Street has increased from 7.5 metres to the dwelling and 7.9 metres to the garage, to a staggered setback of 7.5 metres to 8 metres for the dwelling and 8.57 metres for the garage. If you look at the ground floor plan, the setbacks progressively stagger towards the adjoining neighbours' house. We are now also dwellings 2 and 3, which have increased from 32 square metres to 40 square metres. The larger courtyards provide additional space for the planting of canopy trees on the boundary. Dwelling 4 also has a larger courtyard from 35 to 39 square metres, which also provides improved opportunity for landscaping. The setbacks for dwellings 2, 3 and 4 from the eastern boundary have now increased. The dwellings 2 and 3 have increased setbacks of 3.3 metres on this boundary. This setback has increased by 800 millimetres to now 4.1 metres. Dwelling 4 had setbacks of 3.3 metres from the boundary. The setback has increased by 500 millimetres. The setback from these boundaries previously comfortably satisfied the required setbacks, and these already are generous setbacks and are now even greater. The dwelling 1 has been reduced in size by doing the study and reducing the size of the bathroom, which has in turn provided greater setbacks to the ground level. This resulted in the first floor footprint being much smaller than the ground level, which reduces the overall perception of the visual bulk aspect. First floor footprints were previously attached for much of the length of the site. You will now note that in the elevations that they're now generally separated between these things. When you look at the development from the street, now you clearly see there's gaps in the reduction for the mass, the mass perspective is now being reduced. The elevations now use softer materials and forms, including more thick roof elements, some weatherboard and render, which differentiate between the dwellings from one to the other. Councillors, this is not a tight ballot. We have a site coverage of 47% compared to the allowed 60%. We don't overshadow any adjoining backyards or windows. We provide all necessary car parking on site. This is a large corner site that is within walking distance of the Reservoir train station, Reservoir Activity Centre, Broadway and multiple bus routes. Planning policy strongly encourages development of this nature in this location. We are not proposing reverse living designs. This is a conventional design that enjoys very strong compliance with RESPA.
Mr. Higginbotham, you have 30 seconds.
We still have the support of the planning department, and we ask that the council acknowledge the changes and we've made to the plans, and that the application is supported. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Higginbotham. Okay, then for as an objector, I have one listed, which is Tony Camaccio. Thanks, Mr. Camaccio.
Thanks, councillors. I'm Tony Smart, MC. I reside at 50 Howard Street, obviously next door to the Stefan. I want to make a note that obviously these amended plans are an improvement on the previous plans that were submitted. I'll certainly take that into consideration. It does address some of the concerns, but I still feel that certain concerns are still there. I mean, obviously the private open space issues and the setbacks from the east boundary have certainly improved the whole overall structure of the site. But in relation to the mass building block, even though there has been some separation of the upper levels, they're still all joined at the lower level. So you've still got that same visual bulk down on the bottom. But there has been some separation between two of the units as noted. One of the concerns for myself as well is the number of crossovers allowed on this property, being 4. I note that, each unit is entitled to its own crossover, but I also state that, there's 3 crossovers over a 23.5 metre walkway or footpath, even though that whole Clark Street frontage, is not exceeded as far as the 33% allowable. But if this was to be allowed in every corner site in Reservoir, would certainly create that uneasy, impeding public safety, right, and people's enjoyment of being able to walk without having to worry about if the cars are going to come out. It also creates issues with the number of car parks that are lost. There are at least 3 will be lost in relation to this development. Again, if that was to be replicated, what are we creating? Especially that we are close to an activity centre. Car parks are at a premium as they are now, and yet we're allowing them to be lost, or at least rated, with a concession to. There's going to be 4 extra families of some type living in these proposed units, therefore attracting more people to the area, not less, in the sense that people are going to come and visit. So where are they to park? Generally, most households these days still have 2 cars, 2+ cars. This provides for 2+ cars, being a garage and a tandem car park. But what about people visiting? And certainly, those things haven't really been addressed with what's changed. And also, I still haven't had answers over why this development's been allowed to be built over an easement when I wasn't allowed to be built over this same easement. So that still hasn't been addressed, and how that impacts on the existing properties with the reduction of this easement. How I still haven't been advised as to what works may or may not be needed on my property in order to reduce this easement if it was to be allowed. So I still haven't received anything in that sense. Certainly, just wanted to get a clarification on this report, this recommendation. There were some recommendations on page 99 that were issued on the report dated the 22nd of the 12th after remediation in relation to the east boundary, as far as the plantation of canopy trees and the height of the fence, and that any air conditioning units and things would be put on the lower levels. That doesn't form part of this current existing report. I'm just wanting to see the clarification that those recommendations are still part of this recommendation. And basically, I want to just reiterate that these type of developments are occurring. I just feel that is this the reservoir we're wanting to create, in a sense, from the existing residents that are here, that are there now. I mean, most of these developments, people don't live in the area, so it doesn't matter how it impacts. I see things that, I think it's a slight overdevelopment. I think it could be set out differently, and I think it could be further improved. I'm certainly not against development, because that's the area. I'm certainly not against it, but I just feel that not all the boxes.
30 seconds.
Yeah, and thank you. Not all the boxes have been ticked, but it certainly has been improved with these set of plans. I'm certainly saying that we're heading in the right direction. I just feel that if everything was to take into account, would this development be allowed in its current format, or would a reduced amount better fit? What I'm saying that is, would 3 units separated entirely better suit the future going forward? So I'd like to thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, right on the buzzer. Okay, so we now have questions from councillors. Are there any questions? Councillor Williams.
Just looking at dwelling number 4, is it possible to flip that so it's using the same driveway, so that's one less crossover?
Mr. Rolls.
Yeah, so the dwelling design could be changed, but this is what we have before us at the moment. The applicants are proposing separate crossings to dwellings. But in answer to your question, yes, the development could be redesigned.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Ross. Any further questions? Councillor McCarthy.
If we can just get a response through you to the officers, Mr Acting Chair, regarding the issue of the easement that the objector raised. Just some clarity in relation to the easement question.
Can answer on that.
Yeah, Mr Rudd.
Yeah, that comes up quite a bit, and councillors have attempted to raise this in feedback, and it's been made very clear that they are further processes and further permissions that sit outside the planning process. And really, it's up to the applicant and advisable to the applicant to check those things out during the planning process, because what it means for them, if they don't get consent, they've got to come back to council for further approval. That costs time, that costs a fee as well. So it's not that we don't raise these issues, it's we're not able to lawfully require it through a planning condition for a particular operation around an area. That's unless a statutory authority raises it.
Okay, I'm going to go to, unless it's a supplementary.
It's a supplementary, which is just,
Okay, yep.
it's just following on from that, and thank you for the answer. If I'm correct, then the trigger of consideration of the impact of the easement won't come into play until you get to the building permit site assessment stage.
That's
Is
correct,
that correct?
Mr. Chairman, and that's why there's a note N2 on page 48. That's exactly what that's trying to broadcast.
Yep.
That's as far as we can go as a planning authority or responsible authority in this process.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr Acting Chair. Just a couple of questions. One is first in relation to bulk. I just want to get a better understanding in regards to that particular area there. Do we have many properties where there are 4 dwellings on a block?
Mr Rudd or Mr Wallace?
I'd just like to highlight this site sits within the context of the reservoir structure plan, and there's a statement which was referred to in one of the earlier reports that says those areas within walking distance to the reservoir train station around the reservoir structure plan are encouraged for urban intensification. Incremental change it describes, which is then further described as up to 2 stories.
Okay then. Do I have any further questions?
Sorry, just...
yes, Councillor
It was just following up on the other question that the objector raised, which was whether the additional conditions that were discussed and apparently agreed to, whether they've been incorporated within this proposed revised approval.
They haven't, Councillor. In terms of the recommendation we've put to Council at this stage, it clearly notes condition 1 required changes, but they do exclude those changes that were considered in previous discussions. It is so important that as council officers we require changes that we believe are necessary to achieve compliance with Clause 55, not necessarily changes that a neighbour may simply wish to be made to a project. So if it complies as it stands, we wouldn't impose any additional conditions.
And just supplementary in relation from a process point of view.
Yep, Councillor McCarthy.
Would it then be incumbent upon the objector to make the case for that at VCAT then as a separate matter? Now that
we have on the record, as in the previous reports and previous decisions made by council, it clearly indicates or clearly shows those additional conditions. The objector can raise that at the tribunal hearing. The tribunal member will be made aware of it, given all the documentation that form part of the submissions. Yes, they certainly can.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Do I have any further
Deputy Chair, I have an alternate motion that I'd like to put.
Okay then, if you've got an alternate motion. Councillor Greco.
I'll read it out,
Yep.
Mr Acting Chair, that the planning committee not endorse this new proposal, on three grounds. One is under clause 55.02-1, B1 neighbourhood character. It is considered that the development does not sit comfortably within the neighbourhood context, primarily due to its bulk. 2, clause 55.03-1, B6 street setback. The proposed front setback does not comply with the standard. And point 3, it is considered that the development does not adequately respond to Council's vehicle crossing policy.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that alternate motion?
I'll second it to allow the mover to speak.
Okay then. I'll go to Councillor Gokhan now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Look, first of all, at the outset, I must say that the applicant has made some changes and has been quite forthcoming in trying to fit within the envelope of this particular site. But I think that it actually doesn't go far enough in terms of meeting the standards that we've set, particularly in relation to the neighbourhood character, in terms of the bulk in regards to this particular site, and that is also consistent with the previous motion the council passed in regards to this particular application. In regards to the second point, the setbacks, again, I appreciate the attempts that have been made by the applicant in trying to improve on the setbacks, but I don't think that they go far enough in meeting the standard that's required as per the planning scheme. And thirdly, I think the thing that strikes you about this particular application is that we're looking at the construction of 4 new crossovers. Admittedly, there's already one on that property, but they'll look at the construction of 4 new crossovers in regards to this particular site. Look, in overall terms, I think Council has made a decision on this to reject the application, notwithstanding that there have been improvements. I would argue that the improvements actually don't go far enough in meeting Council's requirements, and as a result of that, I don't think that we can actually endorse the amended plans that have been put forward by the applicant. I think it's important to note that that this particular application or these amended plans have, whilst there has been discussion between the applicant and the objectors, and there have been improvements, but I don't think that those improvements have gone to the fundamental issue of what's here before us. And just to sum up, I just think that we're really pushing the envelope here. I mean, everything has been tried to try and put 4 dwellings on this particular site, and the result that we've come up with, or the applicant has come up with, still does not meet the required envelope in relation to the setbacks and the overall bulk in regards to this particular application.
Councillor McCarthy.
I'll withhold my speaking rights for that, thanks.
Okay. Okay. Do I have any further?
Speak against, Mr. Chair.
Speak against the alternate recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
Quite simply, we've heard the applicant's representative speak in relation to the numerous changes which have been included in great detail in the report, which address the reasons why this council, this committee, actually refused it initially. And those are substantial changes in relation to front setbacks. Councillor Gregor did mention that the front setback does not comply to the way. In fact, it does, and it's been explained by the officer in his report and also by the applicant. And also the increase of private open space. And the redesign of Unit 1, where the actual building envelope's been reduced by removal of extra rooms. And also the very roof form, which has been altered from the initial application. There were comments in relation to neighbourhood character. Well, I'm actually questioning the neighbourhood character of this area, of this strip, in a lot of what's next door and what's also a long-held street. So we need to be a bit wary of actually what we're going to be saying about neighbourhood character. If we're going to actually use that as a defence to consider an alternative recommendation. The officers also said that the site coverage is 14%, well below the compliance. So it actually ticks the box here. There's no showing there's sufficient car space on site, and it's a conventional design where there's no reverse living and complies with Rest Code. The alternative, the changes provided in the report actually says we've now addressed the reasons why you refuse it. We have now got something which actually does comply. So I think we're going to struggle to go with an alternative recommendation to what's proposed by the officers, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Fontana. Any further speakers? If not, I'm going to. If not, you do have a right of reply, Councillor. Okay.
Nothing further to add.
Okay. Okay. In that case, I'm going to put it to a vote. All those in favour of the alternate recommendation. Okay. All those against. And the alternate recommendation is what?
As listed in the report, Mr. Chair.
Nothing further to add? Okay, all those in favour? Seconder? And I'll take the seconder as Councillor Williams. All those in favour? All those against? Okay then, Council has resolved to give support to the application. We now move to reports 6.1. Are there any questions?
I'm happy to move the reports on block, Mr. Acting Chair.
Is that 6.1?
I'll second that.
6.1, 2 and 3?
6.1, 2 and 6.1, 2 and 3. That's correct.
I'll second that, Mr. Acting Chair.
Okay, so that's a move that we move them on they're heard on block. And that's, I'll take the move as Councillor McCarthy and seconder as Councillor Greco. All those in favour? And do I have a mover for 6.1, 2 and 3? Move Councillor Williams, and I'm going to take Councillor McCarthy as a seconder. All those in favour? Thanks. Thanks, councillors. That draws to a close this council committee planning meeting.
What time is it?